Went up the mountain seeking silence. They found something that screamed back. On August 4th, 2023, 2 days after they were expected to return, 4 hikers were officially declared missing from the remote Blackwood mountain range. Their names were Benjamin Carter, Sarah Jenkins, Mark Olson, and Emily Davies. They were all experienced in wilderness trekking, ranging in age from 28 to 35. While embarking on a planned 4-day traverse of the notoriously challenging Blackwood Peaks, seeking a secluded campsite near Observation Peak, they encountered an abandoned fire lookout tower, or so they initially believed it to be. This tower stood approximately 15 miles off any marked trail, perched on the isolated summit. 2 days later, on August 6, 2023, Benjamin Carter, the sole survivor, was discovered disoriented and traumatized near the base of the very fire lookout tower. He revealed gruesome and unbelievable details of what transpired during their ill-fated overnight stay at the seemingly deserted structure. What he described was utterly terrifying. This is a story as told by Benjamin Carter. We'd planned the Blackwood Traverse for months, me, Sarah, Mark, and Emily. We're experienced hikers, but Blackwood is different, remote. We set out on July 30th, expecting a 4-day loop. The first day was uneventful, typical mountain trail. By late afternoon of the second day, we were further off the marked trails, aiming for what the old maps called Observation Peak. We were looking for a specific unmarked campsite near the peak. That's when we saw it. Around dusk, through the thinning trees, the fire lookout tower came into view. It wasn't on any of our updated maps, just the old topographical ones Mark collects. It looked weathered. Decades of neglect, probably. The wood was gray, the metal rusting. It stood stark against the fading light perched right on the peak's edge. We were tired, water was getting low, and the campsite we were aiming for was proving elusive. We decided to check the tower. Figured, at worst, it would be shelter for the night. Approaching the tower, the decay was worse up close. The access road was completely overgrown. We had to bushwhack the last 50 yards. The tower itself was a skeletal thing, maybe 50 feet tall, with a small cabin perched on top. The wooden stairs spiraled up, looking precarious. The ground around the base was strangely bare, almost sterile. No undergrowth, just packed dirt and pine needles. An unnatural clearing in the dense forest. We hesitated at the base. There was a stillness, a heavy silence that wasn't normal, even for deep woods at dusk. Mark tested the first few steps of the staircase. They groaned but held. He went first, then Sarah, then Emily, me bringing up the rear. The climb was unnerving. Each step protested under our weight. The wind picked up as we ascended, whistling through the tower's framework. From halfway up, you could see the full panorama of the valley below, already swallowed by shadow. When we reached the cabin platform, the door was ajar. We pushed it open cautiously and stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly intact, considering the exterior rot. One room, maybe 15 by 15 feet. A cot frame with a stained mattress. A rusted metal desk bolted to the wall. A single high-backed wooden chair. Dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed. The air inside was cold, stale, and carried a faint metallic tang. We found some discarded ration cans decades old, and a cracked ceramic water pitcher, empty. No sign anyone had been here recently or for a very long time. The windows were grimy, but offered a 360-degree view. As the last light faded, the forest outside became an indistinct mass of black. Sarah started rummaging through her pack for the portable water filter. Mark was checking the windows, pointing out landmarks in the growing darkness. Emily just stood by the door, quiet, looking out. Then Sarah stopped moving. She was staring at the corner of the room near the desk, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We all went silent. At first, there was nothing but the wind. Then, a faint scratching sound coming from below. From the base of the tower, or maybe even under it. It was a slow, deliberate scratching like claws on wood or stone. Not animalistic, not frantic, but methodical. We moved to the windows, peering down into the darkness. Nothing. just the blackness of the forest floor, swallowed by night. The scratching continued, rhythmic, unsettling. Mark grabbed his flashlight and pointed it down through a gap in the floorboards. "Nothing there," he said, his voice strained. "Just dirt." The scratching went on. 10 minutes, maybe more, it persisted. We stood there, tense, listening to this inexplicable sound from beneath us. Jack, always the pragmatist, finally broke the silence. "Probably just tree roots shifting," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Let's just get some sleep, we can figure it out in the morning." He started unpacking his sleeping bag. Sarah and Emily exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. I still felt wrong. Something deeply wrong about that sound, and the stillness of the woods around the tower. An unnatural quiet. After we ate a cold meal, Jack insisted on taking first watch. He positioned himself in the chair by the window, flashlight in hand. Sarah and Emily curled up in their sleeping bags on the floor. I took the cot. The scratching had stopped, but the silence felt heavier now. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something unseen just beyond the edge of the light. I must have drifted off eventually. The next thing I knew, Emily was shaking me awake. "Ben, it's your turn," she whispered. "I just finished my watch." I sat up, disoriented. The cabin was dim, lit only by the faint pre-dawn glow filtering through the grimy windows. I looked over at Jack. He was gone. The chair was empty, flashlight lying on the floor, beam pointing towards the door. My stomach lurched. "Where's Mark?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Sarah sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Isn't he?" She trailed off, looking around the small cabin. Mark was gone too. Just Emily and Sarah were there with me. Panic started to tighten my chest. "Mark, Jack," I called out, my voice louder now, fear creeping in. Silence, only the wind whispering around the tower. We rushed to the door, pushing it open and stepping out onto the platform. The sky was just beginning to lighten. The forest stretched out below, still shrouded in mist. No sign of Mark or Jack. Then we saw it. On the railing of the platform, near where Jack had been sitting, a smear of dark, viscous fluid, and another smear on the wooden planks of the platform itself, leading towards the edge of the tower, towards the staircase. Blood. The metallic tang in the air was stronger out here. We moved to the railing, peering over the edge. Through the mist, we could just make out something pale lying on the ground below, near the base of the tower. "Oh God," Sarah breathed, her voice trembling. "Is that?" We didn't need to say it. We both knew. Something had taken Mark and Jack. Something had taken them silently in the night, from a locked cabin high in a tower. Terror seized me, cold and paralyzing. "We have to get out of here," I stammered. "Now." Emily, pale and wide-eyed, just nodded mutely. We stumbled back into the cabin, grabbing our packs, shoving gear haphazardly inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fasten the buckles. "The stairs," Sarah whispered. "They're the only way down." We knew it was a risk, descending that rickety staircase in the pre-dawn gloom, but staying in the tower felt like waiting for whatever had taken Mark and Jack to return. I went first, Sarah behind me, Emily bringing up the rear. Each step down was agony, the wood groaning and protesting under our weight. The mist clung to everything, blurring the forest floor below. We were halfway down when we heard it again. Not the scratching this time. A low growl, deep, guttural, coming from below us, somewhere in the mist-shrouded trees near the tower base. It was closer now, much closer. The growl intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a snarl. Then the sound of movement in the undergrowth, something large crashing through branches, moving fast, towards the base of the tower, towards us. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline surging through me. We scrambled down the remaining stairs, feet slipping on the damp wood. We reached the base and bolted into the trees, away from the tower, away from the growling sound that was rapidly closing in. We ran blindly, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces. I didn't know where we were going, just away. Away from the tower, away from the thing that hunted there. We ran for what felt like hours, until exhaustion forced us to stop. We collapsed against trees, gasping for breath, hearts pounding. The forest was silent now, save for our ragged breathing. The growling was gone, but the silence was even more terrifying. It felt expectant. "We need to keep moving," Sarah gasped, pushing herself upright. "It could still be out there." We started walking again, slower now, more cautiously. We tried to follow the faint game trails, hoping to find a marked path, anything that would lead us out of these woods. Then Emily stopped dead, her hand clamped over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. She was staring back the way we'd come, towards the tower. Following her gaze, I saw it. Standing at the edge of the trees, maybe 50 yards back, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, silhouetted against the pale morning light. It was human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs too long, and its head. It was obscured by shadow, but I could see glints of silver, like long, wild hair. It just stood there, motionless, watching us. A silent, predatory figure at the edge of the woods. Then it moved. Not towards us. It turned and walked slowly, deliberately, back towards the fire lookout tower. It disappeared into the trees, swallowed by the mist and shadow. We stood there, frozen, watching the empty space where it had been. Relief washed over me, weak and shaky. It was gone, for now. We kept moving, walking for hours more, driven by fear and exhaustion. By midday, we stumbled onto a logging road. A road meant people, civilization, safety. We walked until we reached the main highway, flagged down a passing truck. The driver looked at us like we were ghosts, covered in dirt, scratched, clothes torn, faces gaunt with terror. He drove us to the nearest ranger station. I told them everything. About the tower, the scratching, the growls, Mark and Jack disappearing, the blood, the figure in the woods. They listened, their faces grim. They knew about the old fire lookout tower, knew it had been abandoned for decades, knew the area around Blackwood Mountain was unsettling. They launched a search for Mark and Jack immediately. They found Sarah and Emily's bodies 2 days later, near the base of the fire lookout tower. Mauled, savagely torn apart. Animal attacks, they called it, officially. Bear, maybe a cougar gone rabid. They found traces of blood on the tower platform, confirming my account of something happening up there. But they found no sign of Mark or Jack. No bodies, no remains, just gone. They went back to the tower, of course. Searched the cabin, the platform, the surrounding woods. They found nothing unusual. No trace of any human presence besides our own. No sign of any animal large enough to inflict those kinds of injuries. The scratching sound? They dismissed it as natural settling of the old structure. The figure in the woods? Mistaken identity, fatigue, stress-induced hallucination. That's what their report concluded. But I know what I saw, what we all heard, what took my friends. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something that lives in those woods around that tower, something ancient and hungry. And it's still out there, waiting, watching, near the fire lookout tower. Following Benjamin Carter's statement, Park Services closed off access to Observation Peak and the surrounding area indefinitely, citing dangerous wildlife and unstable terrain. Unofficially, local rangers speak of old legends, whispers of something malevolent haunting the Blackwood Mountain Range, something tied to the old fire lookout tower. The tower itself remains, a silent sentinel on the peak, a place of unexplained disappearances and unanswered questions. And sometimes, on quiet nights, hikers in the distant valleys claim to hear a faint, rhythmic scratching carried on the wind. The rangers still patrol Blackwood Mountain, though they admit they avoid Observation Peak after dark. Sometimes late at night when the wind is just right, they say you can hear a faint scratching sound carried down from the heights. They say it's just the old tower settling, but some of them swear it sounds like something else entirely, something patiently waiting for the next silence to break. Was it a creature of the wilderness? A forgotten legend come to life? Or something even darker? Share your theories in the comments below. Don't just listen, dare to delve deeper.